Hi, friends. Welcome back to Adobe Live. I hope y'all are doing so great on this lovely Wednesday. As always, my name is Idara Ekpoh. I'm really excited to be back here for another spotlight and to introduce the amazing creative that we're going to be talking to today. As you know, if you don't know already, Adobe Spotlight is a series where we sit down with industry professionals to learn about their inspirations, Adobe workflow, creative journey, all of the above, and really honestly, whatever we decide to talk about on the stream. And so, as always, I want to go ahead and welcome you guys, whether you are joining on YouTube or Behance. Thank you so much for joining us here at Adobe Live. Make sure you go ahead and follow us on all platforms, whether that is Instagram, YouTube, etc., at Adobe Live, because you don't want to miss out on future streams and just connecting with this amazing community. So I'm really excited because today we have the amazing photographer and a friend of mine, Oghalé Alex, who's going to be here. Oghalé is a Nigerian-American creative director and photographer based in both London and Los Angeles. Oghalé, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for the lovely intro and bringing me in.
Oh,
Super excited to, be speaking to you and share a little bit about work and just, have a catch up and chat as well.
yes, honestly, I feel like Oghalé and I offline have been needing to catch up. So this is like pushing us to do that,
I
but
know.
with a live audience. But if you guys have any questions throughout the chat or throughout the stream, excuse me, please be sure to drop them in the chat. I will be sure to catch all the questions as they come through. Thank you so much, y'all. The moderators, excuse me, are adding Jack for adding Oghalé's website as well as Instagram in the chat. Go ahead and give him a quick follow. And Oghalé, go ahead and share to get us started. Can you share with us like a brief history and background of who you are and I guess what initially drew you to photography?
Yeah, well, that's really easy to talk about. I think what I've always believed is every artist or every person who creates is almost like their work is a reflection of who they are. And so I didn't really plan to get into photography or be a photographer or anything like that. I sort of just stumbled into it. And the way that I am, I think, has like influenced the way that I shoot, and somehow
Mm.
people seem to like it. So, that's not too bad. Um, but the funny story behind getting into photography was that it's actually a mutual friend of ours who I was kind of dating at the time, who she advised me to buy a camera because she was like, "Oh, you have good style and stuff. You should buy a camera and do YouTube videos." And because I liked her, I bought the camera. It wasn't really anything more than that. And then I don't know, somehow I think it was a friend of mine graduating was like, "Oh, can you take a few photos of me?" And I agreed, and I thought it was the coolest thing. I was like, how amazing. Like I had no idea that photography was one so easy, but
Mhm.
also so rewarding. Like, being able to create different narratives and stories just by how you frame things and the compositions and all the different cool technical aspects that I thought were really interesting. So that's how I sort of got into it. And then, from there on, sort of just developed a little bit by little, like my own style and things like that.
Oh, shout out to the girl that you were dating at that time. For
Joe,
at
if
least
if you remember Joe,
yes,
is her.
I do. But she did a really, at least being able to I think what's crazy, especially because we started as photographers around the same time. And
Yeah,
I think that the crazy thing is just like how you can randomly stumble into something and have no idea of what part it will play somewhere down the line in your future, if any part at
yeah,
all. And I think
that's
that's the
true.
incredible part about I think your journey is hearing about how it wasn't like an intentional, oh, I want to start this thing. It was just something you stumbled upon it, and now it's what you do. And so I think it's just really inspiring to hear about that aspect of it all. And I would love for us to kind of go through your website to kind of see some of your work. And I think one of
Oh.
the questions that I also want to ask you is when you go through your bio, it does say that a lot of your work is largely inspired by the concept of calm. So can you elaborate on that and what does that mean? What does this concept of calm mean to you?
Yeah, it's kind of touching on the last thing that I spoke about or briefly touched on about
Mhm.
an artist's work and being an example of who they are. And as a person, I'm a very kind of calm person. I just like to take my time with things. I like to go for walks. I listen to a lot of like 50s and 60s jazz, which nobody cares about, but I care about, like a lot of Miles Davis and John Coltrane. And um I don't know, everything I do, I think I try to do it at a slow pace. Even the way I dress, like even like what I'm wearing now, there's no logos
Mm-hmm.
on it. It's all
Mm-hmm.
about texture and form and color rather than saying. So, and again, like we're both Christians, I feel like that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge part of my identity as well as being a Christian. And a lot of what I try to do is trying to be something without
Mm-hmm.
having to scream it or say it. I want people to
Mm-hmm.
be able to feel it. So it's in the way that I live, it's in the clothes that I wear, it's in who I am, and that directly sort of translates to my work because in a photo like this one here, you have these muted colors and you have
Yeah.
sort of a very simple message of togetherness and unity. And there's like the
Mm.
calming, the water. And so there's a lot of landscape and earth. And I feel like it just kind of matches up with who I am as a person. Like there's
Yeah.
no bold colors, there's nothing shouting at you. Everything feels very calm and very peaceful. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that no matter, like as you can see, like these are all for different sort of clients, and no
Mm-hmm.
matter the client, I try to bring that same sort of feeling and emotion and coloring and
Mm-hmm.
just a sense of peace to everything. And so, yeah, that's kind of where that whole connect to calm comes from.
I love that you mentioned that regardless of the client, you try to kind of stay true to who you are. Do you ever find that like what I guess like how do you guys I guess navigate the conversations you have with potential clients and trying to obviously execute whatever their vision is or whatever it is that they want for their brand, but also staying true to yourself. Because what I've noticed is that like all of
Mm.
your work, whether it's regardless if it's personal work or brand work, it all is aligned. So is that like intentional as far as the conversations you're having with clients? Does it just happen to like be like that they trust you and just love the work that you do and want you to do in whatever way that you see fit? Like what does that look like when interacting with clients and trying to stay true to yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel as though what has really helped me navigate those situations is just being extremely curatorial, if that's a word, over
Mm,
my work. Like the everything that I put out, because I do a lot of different work that nobody ever sees.
yeah.
But a lot of the work that I try to put out is work that I feel has a harmony with everything. And so it's almost like if I don't want to be hired to do wedding photography, I'm not going to put weddings on my site. That
Mm-hmm.
it's that sort of frame. So
Mm,
every time I shoot, no matter what it is, it all feels like it's the same, body of work. And I think clients then start to recognize that, and they really only hire me now to do what I already do, but just to
yeah.
do it for them. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's the sweet spot. And there is obviously there's some clients that they want something a little bit different, but even within those shoots and those campaigns or those
Mm-hmm.
editorials or whatever it is, I'll make sure I get a couple images for myself, and those will be the ones that I share rather than sharing the whole load. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's my strategy. It kind of works
Oh,
well because they don't really, if you always talk about the same things, like they're willing to hire you to just do that.
yeah. I love that. I love that. And it makes it enjoyable for you. It doesn't really feel
100%.
like, oh, I have to do something I don't actually want to do. And I know that that's the one thing that I feel like as photographers, especially when we're on this journey of figuring out who we are, our style, we tend to try a lot of different things. But when you can land upon what is you and your voice, especially in your work, and you have people that want to hire you for that, it just makes the experience so much like just more pleasurable. And as we kind of go through your work, I had another question, and then we'll go into like Lightroom. And if y'all have any questions throughout this stream, please drop them in the chat because I'm gonna be asking the questions I want to ask. So and I don't like to be selfish on this platform. But do you have a body of work that you is like that's on your site that you will say is your absolute favorite and why?
Oh, that's so tough. It's like picking between your favorite child. You know, I feel it's not easy for
Give
me to do, and I don't know if I can, but I can
mm-hmm,
I can talk about this one on the left
mm-hmm,
here, which is probably whenever I need to submit one image for something, it's the one that I always go to.
mm-hmm,
And specifically because the story behind it is very unique and like how it came to be. Because I was shooting it for a brand called Co Laundry, who
mm-hmm,
very early they made me sort of their principal photographer. So I shot like every campaign for them, and it was a great opportunity because we shot in so many different parts of the world, and they had the budget to just back my ideas, which I thought was like, you don't get that really, or it's
mm-hmm,
not very common. And so I think I was just in LA for like a holiday or something like that. And I saw this girl on Instagram, and at the time she wasn't really modeling. She had maybe done one or two
Mm,
things, but it
wow.
wasn't like it was just like throwaway things with friends. It wasn't like, and somehow she just showed up on my explore page, and I thought she had the most unique face I'd ever seen
Hmm.
in my life. And immediately I like DM'd her trying to see if I could get her to LA to do a shoot. And this was the blessing of Cold Laundry because I could immediately call the owner and say, "Look, I have this idea. We should shoot this. We should make a
Hmm.
campaign out of this." And she was down to do it. She wanted to bring a friend, but I was able to fly her from North Carolina to LA and pay for
Wow.
her hotel, pay for everything. And then we shot a campaign. And I love the image because I was taking a bunch of portraits of her that were long, were full, were different
Mm,
sizes and lengths, and it felt very overwhelming. But when I took this crop,
mm,
I just felt like it just felt really like me. Like I don't know how to explain it, but I just looked
hmm.
at it and I felt like it's almost like it's not me trying to big it up, but it
Yeah,
reminds
yeah.
me of that like Mona Lisa-esque
Yeah,
stare, that like
yeah,
sort of blank look,
yes, yes, yes.
and the crop made it not so overwhelming with all the freckles that she had on her
Hmm.
face and everything like that. So for its uniqueness, I like this is my image. Like every time I
Yeah,
entered into something, it always does well, or it always,
yeah,
so this is my favorite, I would say.
yeah. I thought I 1000% agree. I think it's very difficult to pick a body of work that is like a favorite, but this one is just so unique. And like not only unique in like who she is and her the way that she looks, but how you decided to capture her and really focusing in on like the stare in her eye, her freckles, all of it together. Like I love that you mentioned that it doesn't feel overwhelming, it doesn't feel busy. And it's
Yeah.
crazy how much like just cropping an image can change completely the feel and vibe of a photo. So I think that's incredibly dope. And I think this was probably like I also didn't know that she hadn't really started modeling, which is also another crazy thing because I think her
Oh my gosh,
career
yeah.
as a model has like grown
She's
so
she's bigger
much.
than
She's
she's bigger than me
big.
now. She's I, and we like I tease her about that because like I'll see her in Target now and I'm like,
Yeah,
Cassandra, when did you get into Target? Like
she's
when
in
did
Target. Yeah.
but it's amazing. And this is so funny because at the time she had said that she kind of thought being a model was cool, but she was really in school and focusing on that. And
Hmm.
seeing her journey from like doing this shoot, doing a couple more shoots when she got back to North Carolina, like then getting signed in LA, and then
Yeah.
like all sorts of things that happened after that. It was incredible, really.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. I love it. I love it. So I kind of want to shift gears and talk about your overall design process and how you
Sure.
utilize Adobe tools. I know that you use Lightroom and Photoshop. I think we'll primarily be in Lightroom today, but can you give us some like insight on what your editing process usually looks like and how do you use Lightroom and or Photoshop to really bring your creative concepts to life?
Yeah, from the very first moment I started taking photos, I maybe like for the first month I edited on my phone using like phone editing
Mm-hmm.
apps. And then
Yeah.
yeah, and then I was like, you know what? I need to do this seriously. And to me, serious was Adobe. Like I felt like all of the
Mm-hmm.
serious people I knew were either on Adobe or Capture One, but I always just loved the way Adobe works, almost like I love the way my iPhone works. I just felt like
Mm-hmm.
everything made sense and was easy for me to grasp. And so I developed a process, and I've learned throughout meeting all these different photographers that everyone does things in such a different way.
Yeah,
And so I know that there's not a one way of doing it, but for
of
me
course.
personally, I will shoot, and however many images come out of that shoot, I will kind of call the photos and bring it down to a more manageable number. And then I will import these into Adobe. And then
Mm-hmm.
from Adobe Lightroom, I will sort of do all of my coloring, editing, everything that happens to a photo mostly happens in Lightroom for me. And then once my coloring is done,
Mm.
I then take it to Photoshop to just do little bits of cleanup with like retouching and skin and things like that. But I would say
Mm-hmm.
that I rely heavily on Lightroom, especially Lightroom Classic.
Oh yeah. Like you know what's so funny? I usually try to ask other photographers like, do you prefer Lightroom Classic or the Lightroom Creative Cloud, Lightroom CC? I am a classic girl through and through.
Yeah.
I can't even I've tried Creative
I've
Cloud.
tried. It doesn't work for me.
It
I don't
doesn't
know.
work. I feel like when something is like has been working for you since day one, you just
Right.
stick to what you know. But I love that you
Yeah.
mentioned like starting on your phone, because I have a similar experience when I had started photography. I was doing all my editing on my phone on a little, I don't even remember what app I was using, but
Yeah.
editing on my phone and then just like sending it via Google Drive
Sending
to
it.
friends. Once I started paying for Lightroom, I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so professional.
Yeah, I love that. I love the feeling of feeling like a professional, and I feel like that's Adobe.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So I think what I'm really excited is to see what, like maybe like any of these images that you have, what they would look like throughout the stream, just on the back end. But as we continue the conversation, I also wanted to ask you, like, one of the things that you in general mention about your work is that it's a vehicle to change, to challenge and change the negative perceptions of surround Black women and Black men. So how do you feel that you go about that, that your work is, how do you feel that is really best represented in your work?
Yeah, that's great because I think when I first got into photography, like on a kind of a more commercial scale or start like doing big projects, I noticed that there was a lack of diversity, which is like a drum that
Mm-hmm.
has been overbeat, and but it's there, and so you experience it, so you can only talk about what you experience.
Yeah.
And I felt as though what was great about my work, or at least the work that I was trying to curate, was that it looked very clean and very prestige and very like minimalistic. And I felt like, how cool would it be to focus on people of color, Black people,
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of different kinds of people. Even like
Yeah.
Cassandra is a great example because she's the kind of person that maybe you look back 20 years ago, she wouldn't be someone that would be on a big campaign for Target or for a big
Yeah.
brand. They might have just used, cookie cutter patterns of people they've always
Yeah.
used. And I felt like I really loved the image of Cassandra even more and working with people like her because there's so much beauty in different types of people. And I feel
Yeah.
like you'll see me shoot lots of groups and I'm trying to kind of pick out different people, different skin tones, different
Yeah.
hair textures, different body types, like just make it as inclusive as possible and,
Yeah.
shoot different types of people and give everyone their own day in the limelight, and
Mm.
so with my work, you'll find a lot of the times you'll see people of color or just diverse subjects and
Mm-hmm.
presented beautifully with, great looking hair, great, just everything dolled up to the point where it
Yeah.
looks, it looks very nice and presents them in a good
Yeah.
way.
No, absolutely. And I love that what you mentioned about Cassandra. Like, if this was 20 years ago, 10 years ago, you probably wouldn't see somebody that looks like her. But I think it's even, I love how you mentioned like it not just being like skin tone. You had to mention like hair textures. You
Yeah.
mentioned features. Like, even with Cassandra, she has those freckles. And like some
Yeah.
people might, there was a time where that was deemed not as beautiful as other features.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned all these different aspects of what make people who they are and all the different features that they have, where it's not just, oh, I'm just shooting people based off of one specific look, but I'm considering hair
Right.
textures, I'm considering size, I'm considering skin tones, I'm considering like facial features, all those different things that really kind of show who we are as people and our individuality. I think it's incredible to see how you kind of incorporate that into your work. Is
Yeah.
what photo do you think that we, because I kind of want to dive into like any specific like techniques that you utilize in Lightroom specifically that really help to enhance your photos. So I think this is a great time to maybe look at a photo and kind of walk through some of the steps that you like to use and overall techniques and steps that you usually go for when editing.
Yeah, I think every photo is very different. And
Yep.
so some photos require a lot more work, some require a lot less.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way I look at Adobe Lightroom is like it's like a tool to bring out your vision, and
Mm.
you can use it to create whatever it is that you're trying to do. And so like with an image like this, for example, it was a sort of editorial for Bottega Veneta,
Mm-hmm.
and we were in collaboration with this magazine, and we were just kind of walking around this park in London. And London is not the most beautiful city to find minimal places to
Mm.
shoot. I think that it's very busy, it's hectic, and so we found this like skate park, and you could see that like there's a lot going on in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
But when I had her here, there was something about having her in this scene And I looked specifically in this bottom left corner here, and I
Mm,
loved this pink kind of
wow.
color. I loved what this looked like. I didn't even know what it was, but I was like, let me take it and then I'll get back to my computer and I'll figure out what I can do with this
Mm-hmm.
image. And so immediately when I came into Lightroom, I knew that I was going to get rid of the trees because I try to avoid greenery if I can.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I was going to get rid of these board lines of the, here,
Mm-hmm.
all these little different lines here. And so, and even the lines here, like, and that's a huge part of my work is, trying to make things look clean and minimal. And that often
Yeah.
involves removing little aspects and different things that don't add to that. So
Mm-hmm.
I did this in sort of four stages. Like there was initial coloring, which looked kind of like this to kind of bring out that color and kind of
Mm.
expand it more along, the back end of here. And then I was like, okay, it's going in the right direction. But with the way I was pushing and pulling the colors, you could see that the greenery is now like all distorted, which is usually why I discard the greenery because it looks ridiculous after a while. And so then it went on to another stage of coloring where I then took it into Lightroom, took it back, or took it into Photoshop, took it
Photoshop, yeah.
back. Yeah, and then I removed the greenery altogether, and I sort of used like the mask tool to just kind of keep masking, cloning until I could
Mm-hmm.
kind of get rid of the sky and kind of
Mm.
give this background here. Like all of this is what you see basically, this
Yeah.
whole coloring and all of that. It's just removing the lines, removing the sky, and then
Mm-hmm.
putting that in different places, multiplying it, adding maybe even a few more colors to it.
Yeah.
And then it became really easy to start messing around with colors and pushing and pulling. And one thing I always do is I bring the contrast down, I bring the whites down.
Mm.
I spend a lot of time in HSL,
Okay.
which I don't know. I forgot like the latest one now. I
Uh,
don't know if
wait,
HSL
go
is still
back. Yeah, click on color mixer
color mixer.
and then mixer. There you go.
Yeah, here we go. Yeah, I spend a lot of time here just kind of manipulating the hue and then seeing how
Mm-hmm.
that affects it, and then manipulating the strength of it, which is the saturation, and seeing how
Yeah.
that affects, and then even the
Yeah.
luminance and up and down. All of these tools I think have been the most handy in my photography career,
Mm.
especially the HSL, because you're able to really get a very soft, like, I don't know, I just describe it like milk. That's how I try to, when you
Ah,
bring the
okay.
luminance down, you bring the saturation down and up a little bit, you manipulate the reds and the oranges, you start to get,
Mm-hmm.
going from something that looked initially like this, which was, her skin looks fine, but then you get into something that looks much more vibrant, much more lively, and it kind of
Mm-hmm.
goes on with the whole background. And then from there, it goes again into removing more things. So then I think from here to the last one, you can see that a little bit of
Yeah.
this has disappeared. You know, let's go back into it. Yeah, a little bit more disappears and reappears every time. Then the lines and the boardwalk, finally
Wow.
disappear, and eventually you end up with a final image. And don't know why maybe this is the final one. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you end up with the final image, and then when you look back at the before and after, it looks like night and day. And when I show people this, they're like amazed that these are the same photo. But it all
Yes.
started from, you know, being able to see this little piece here in the original photo and thinking, if I can get that over the whole
Yeah.
photo, it would look amazing.
Oh, I love that. So that was something that you already knew. Is in regards to this photo, you already kind of had an idea just based off of when you were shooting, what you were ideally, maybe you didn't know how exactly you were going to do it, but like seeing that little portion of the photo, you know, I'm going to take this and later on, I know that this is what I want. And I love that how you were able to kind of incorporate what you were seeing in person and really bringing it into life throughout the rest of your editing. That's really amazing and incredible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That, like, honestly, it comes from, most times I don't know how it's going to end up, but
Hmm.
it's just an idea. And I feel
Yeah.
like, within Lightroom and Photoshop, there's so much creative freedom that I don't know what it's going to look like, but I know it's going to
Yeah.
look good.
Yeah. No, I
So
love that. I love that. You mentioned that this photo was for which magazine again?
I'm not even sure. I was so hyped about it being for Bottega Veneta that I was like, I forgot the name of the
It's like
magazine.
guys, but
Whatever magazine, like.
whatever magazine. But your work has been published in a lot of different places, Kinfold, Natal, Viewpoint, Color Magazine. So what has that experience been like for you? You know, going from a photographer that was just created to now being a photographer who creates and your work is being published in magazines. How is that? What does that journey look like for you?
Yeah, you know what's funny is I because I'm kind of a nerd, I took a very methodical approach to like, okay, if I'm gonna be a photographer, how can I make it as a photographer? What are the photographers that do all these amazing things? What do they look like? And
Hmm.
I felt like they were always in, at least the ones that I cared for, they were always in magazines, their work was always being published somewhere or
Hmm.
shared. And so I made it a point to always take images, that have sort of an editorial feel so that they can be used for different magazines and different things. And Kinfolk have, used a few of my images.
Hmm.
There's stuff that I've been commissioned to shoot, like the one with Bottega. And so many different times. The process looks different every time. Some magazines accept submissions, some will look for you and find your work and
Yeah.
pay you a licensing fee to use it. And some will give you money in advance and say, hey, create this for us. This is what we have. Go out and just get something that looks like this, or uses this
Yeah.
dress, or uses, whatever it is. And so it's a really rewarding experience to see your work in print. I will say that.
Yeah.
I feel like that makes it feel very real. It feels like, wow, I've
Mm.
actually accomplished something. And what I actually do, I don't know if other photographers do the same, but every time I have something in print, I make sure I get a copy of the book, the
Oh,
magazine, the
yeah.
whatever it is, and I store it. And so eventually I'll be able to show my kids or anyone who cares, like, to see, like, okay, look, these are some of the places my work has been published.
No, I love that point of getting the work and having the actual hand copy of wherever it was published. It just tells like a story of your journey. And I think whether it's your children, future kids, or like anyone, is not a lot of people will probably care. A lot of people would probably care, but being able to show them like that journey, I think is really, really incredible because I do agree that like we live in a day and age that everything is so digital, and being able
Mm,
to see your work in print is so, 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 so important. It's like a different
yeah.
feeling. What would you say that feeling was the first time you saw your work in print?
Yeah, it's amazing because you feel like all the time you spent in Lightroom or Photoshop editing, coloring, it actually comes out in the flesh, and you
Mm,
can hold it, you can touch it. A lot of the times when I do prints, I print out in Hannah Muley, which is like
mm-hmm,
a German brand, and they have a paper which is called William Turner. It's like my favorite paper to use. It's
mm-hmm,
very rough and textured,
mm-hmm.
and I know you're not supposed to touch it, but I always touch it. um, because it has such a grainy and rough feel that when you see your work printed on it, it feels like the photo is alive,
Mm,
like,
mm,
especially for me, where I take a lot of images with landscapes like this. When I touch an image like this in print, it feels like I'm touching sand, and I feel that it adds a different layer to your work. Seeing it on Instagram, seeing it on your phone is cool, but holding it, feeling it, I think it just, I don't know, adds another dimension to your work.
mm-hmm. Oh, I love that. I love, especially when you said like it feels like you have a photo that may have sand. And you're like, it feels like sand. I love that description there. Do you have any of your, just out of curiosity, do you print and put any of the, like your favorite pieces of your work in your home space, or do you just kind of leave that out, like put other artwork, or do you even really have artwork? I see that I think there's a picture frame behind you, but
Yeah. You know what? I don't. I feel that I probably should, but I don't know, maybe it feels too like, oh, here's me and my work.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know. What I do, however, is when people, because I sell prints of my work, and when people
Hmm.
buy prints or, ask about prints, and I make samples. And
Hmm.
so when I make the sample, then I keep the sample. And so the
Okay.
sample becomes my, like,
Your
oh, okay, I
personal
can hold on to
copy.
this, my own personal copy.
Hmm.
Yeah. This image here on the left that I brought up now is probably my most printed
I believe
piece of
it.
work
I
ever. Like,
believe it.
anytime anybody buys a print from me, 9 out of 10 times it's this one.
Wow.
Um, and I love it, but I wonder why sometimes. I'm like, okay, it's cool, it's
I,
a nice image, but I feel like there are others that I would have printed before this.
really?
Yeah, but that one, like, without a doubt, is used so many times. And this was actually the shoot that we mentioned earlier with Cassandra. You can kind of see Cassandra here in the middle.
Hmm.
Um, but that was the campaign we shot with her as well.
Yeah. No, I think for me, because this is one of my favorite images for you. I think one of the things I really appreciate in your work is like attention to detail and like how simple it is, but also like you have like your use of things being symmetric or reflections in case like
Mm,
in this case I really love like how they're holding hands and like part of them are reflective in the bottom with the water. Like I love how when you place them and like I don't know, was that intentional for you, like being like, okay, you know, it seemed like it rained this day, so when you showed up to this location realized it rained, how did you go about using that to your advantage, or was it more of a inconvenience than anything else?
I think it was mostly a coincidence, but then it ended
Ah.
up working out really well. But what happened was this was part of the same shoot I was talking about, where I was actually driving over, there was a bridge just behind, and I
Mm-hmm.
was driving over the bridge, and I saw this, I think it's the LA River, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the LA River is quite dry. Some of it is, just got random bits of water in it for whatever reason, and it just looked beautiful. I just thought,
Okay.
what a cool space. Like it's a space where no one's standing down there, nothing's happening there. And how cool, because I try to look for open space and it's hard to look
Mm-hmm.
for open space within cities usually. And so when I
Yeah.
find it, I'm like, oh, this is great. And I think here along the coast, along the coastline or the
Mm-hmm.
line there were some little things that I removed, but it was a
Oh,
very
okay.
intentional choice to keep in the power lines. I felt like the power lines added to the minimalism of the shot.
Yeah.
And then you could also see the reflections of them in the water. And so I
Mm-hmm.
thought, oh, that looks really cool. And so
Mm-hmm.
the water itself wasn't the key thing, but it was more so the space. But when you then a
Mm.
lot of times when you take the photo, you're like, wow, like
Yeah.
that's great. Like I couldn't have
Yeah.
even planned that. That's even
Yeah.
better than I thought.
Oh, I love that. I love that some things happen by coincidence and they're like, wow, this is better than what I could have even imagined it felt like. Oh, and we have a comment that says the reflections on the left image are dreamy. So the reflections in this photo, I think it just kind of like, it's just the togetherness feeling. I think this one's called Can We Pray, right?
Yeah, yeah, can we
Not
pray? Yeah.
me knowing the name of your work. Wow.
Right.
It's
That's
giving fan.
what an honor. No, that's really kind. I feel like I sometimes it feels like I'm creating work for myself. And
Mm,
then if people like it, people like it. If they don't like
yeah,
it, they don't like it. But when I'm creating the work, I don't think of, can I make this something that this person will like or that person will like? I just try to think, okay, well, what am I about? I'm a
exactly.
Christian. I like minimalism. I like and I try to just put all of these things into my work. And then, fortunately people like it. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Exactly. The people that it's for are always going to navigate and make their way towards you. So I feel like it
Yeah.
just resonates in a certain way.
Yeah.
Going back to, I have so many questions for you, man. It's crazy. But going back to when you kind of talked about print, because that's what kind of brought us into this conversation. You
Yeah.
mentioned that was your mostly print photo, and you've had your work featured in magazines, but you've also had your work in different like art galleries. So the National Portrait Gallery of England, Italian Vogue in Milan. So what does that process look like, or what does it look like for you? And then how does it feel to see your work on such a large global scale? And just
Yeah.
like, and have you seen any impact come from that as well?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that anyone can do anything. Like I don't
Mm,
believe like I picked up a camera because, of just randomly a girl told me to pick up a camera and I did. It wasn't like I planned to do it. And I really believe that anyone can do anything. You just need to learn a little bit, have
mm-hmm,
some maybe mentorship, practice all the time, and you can sort of pick it up. And the way I got into the National Portrait Gallery is almost the same way. Like I was in London with a friend and she was like, "Oh, let's go check out this portrait gallery. They've got this
mm-hmm,
cool exhibition going on." And I remember walking in there and I thought I saw the work and I was like, "My work is just as good as this work. There's no
mm-hmm,
reason why my work can't be in here." And it was just a passing thought that I didn't even express to her. But when I came back and I thought about it, they had submissions, I think, in a few months. And so I
mm-hmm.
submitted a piece of work and just I was like, okay, let's see what happens, whatever. And it was the first time I submitted and they accepted it right away. And
Wow.
unfortunately it was during COVID, and so they had it sort of in the exhibition, but they also had it digitally, so
Mm-hmm,
not a lot of people could see it, because of travel and restrictions and things like that, but it was always available online. But
mm-hmm.
that experience again taught me that, again, anything is possible, nothing is out of your
Yeah.
reach. And
Mm,
again, with the Italian Vogue, I've also done one in Belgium as well. Just having the exhibitions, I think it more so is just another reminder that like these things are possible. Like nothing is
Yeah.
out of your reach. You work hard, you pray, you figure out how to do things, you learn from people who you need to learn from,
Hmm.
and all these things are possible. So it's all a blessing the way I look at it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Another question I want to ask you, and I have a question specific to your work, but before I get to that,
Mhm.
um, you mentioned how you talk about like nothing is really out of your reach, right? So like when you get to the point of like if there's something you want to do, you're always going to find a way to be able to do it. What are some, I guess, on the other end of that, what have been some challenges for you that you have faced as a photographer, and then how have you found yourself overcoming them? Even especially with that mindset of like if I want to do this, I'm gonna
Yeah.
find a way. So the times that challenges have come up, how do you kind of deal with those moments?
Yeah, I think some of the challenges getting into photography at this level or even at whatever level anyone wants to is always access,
Mm,
access, knowing the right people. And I've sort of embraced those challenges by just continually reaching out, like it's that like age old, adage that you're gonna get all these no's and no's, but you'll get a yes, and that will make
yeah.
up for all the no's you get. And I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's like that. Like I've even like some of the images I'm showing now are people that I kind of found on Instagram and I thought, oh, like these people are cool. Like it'd be great to do a project with this person, with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with a DM, it starts with a message, it starts with an email
Mm-hmm.
and reaching out. And I think that I was reading a quote from Steve Jobs when he was alive, and he was talking about how when he was a kid, he wanted to learn how to, I think he wanted an internship with a company,
Mm-hmm.
and he just picked up a phone book because that's what people, had at the time, and he found the CEO or the person who ran the company and just called them. And they had
Wow.
never had anyone call them about something like that, and they were like, yeah, okay, yeah, come by and we'll get you involved. And that's how he got sort of into computers and things like that. And I feel as
Mm-hmm.
though with my work, I kind of think the same thing. If there's a challenge, like you'll overcome it most times by just asking,
Yep.
finding someone who knows and ask, or finding the people you need and ask. You like this makeup artist, why not ask them to work with you and see? Because they might say no, but they might say yes,
Yeah.
and then you can build on that. Then you leverage that. Okay, well, do you know any models? Let's work with that model. Okay, do you know this person? And then your network starts to grow, and then you
Mm-hmm.
gain that access, which was missing.
Mm. Oh, I love that. I love that. Now, going back to your work, there was
Mhm.
a question that I had because as you're kind of scrolling through all the different images that you have, one thing that I really love is your use of like, and I mentioned this in the last comment that I made as far as like your use of like things being symmetrical. Your
Yeah.
composition is honestly incredible. What has it taken you to get to that place? Like, was it just like you had like a preference of like, I just like things to be this way, or was there a lot of research? Like, what really influenced, I guess, your style in regards to the actual placement of your models, the composition that you have in your images?
Yeah, it's mostly inspired by, I don't want to call it OCD because we don't speak things over ourselves.
Yeah.
But I just have this like desire for things to just be like balanced and equal.
Mm,
And, I feel as though that nature has like transcended into my work, because then you see two faces, they've got to be equal. If you see
mm-hmm,
this image on the right and you've got three rows, okay, there's got to be three rows, there's got to be three trees, there's got to be
mm-hmm,
no lines intersecting anybody. It's just got to be clean. And
mm,
the more I like researched and dug into like people who are like that, I noticed that Wes Anderson has become like a huge inspiration,
mm-hmm.
because when you look at his work, he uses these sort of planimetric compositions, is what he calls them. And it's the idea that everything is on a plane and everything is sort of like crossed or like lines. There's a lot
Yeah,
of symmetry in every shot. And I
yeah,
feel as though that's me. I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm composing an image, and then when everything slots into place, I just feel like, I feel all right, I feel
yeah,
relaxed, but when
yeah,
someone is out of place, it makes it feel, I don't know, I don't feel okay with the image. I feel like I need to shoot it again. There's even been sets where I've been on and I'm holding the camera for like 15 minutes, just a little bit left, a little bit right, a little bit.
mm-hmm.
And the models are tired. They're like, just take the shot. And I'm like, no, because it's not right. It's not right.
Yeah,
You've got to stand in the right place. The lines have to be right. Because I'm trying to also save myself work in editing. Because if I don't do it there, I'm gonna have to fix it somehow in
Yep,
Photoshop.
yep, exactly that, exactly that.
So yeah,
Um,
the inspiration does come from Wes Anderson. There's also like an old photographer called Sergio Lorin. His work is
uh,
really, really cool. He does a lot of these sort of compositions with people in the foreground, the background. I think in an image like this one here, where you
mm-hmm.
have this guy sitting in the bottom. I've added in my sort of balance with the three people standing, but then I was like, oh,
Yeah,
how cool would it just add someone in the foreground?
yeah.
And I put these images even side by side because they're both foreground heavy images. You know, you got a subject in the foreground
Mm-hmm.
and the background, and there's that balance again that you're talking about, or
Yeah,
the symmetry, because even with the two models here on the left, you've got their heads are both in doorways, you know, like these are very like
yes.
conscious things that
Mm-hmm.
are like, you know, thought of because I just wanted to have balance. I just wanted to feel
Yes.
right. And so when I look
No.
at it and then anyone looks at it, it brings like that calm into them.
It absolutely does. I think you're very intentional about that and you're successful with that as well. The other question, it's funny that I love that you mentioned like your inspirations of Wes Anderson and the other photographer you mentioned as well, because that was a question I was going to ask you as well. So you took care of that. Like, but there was a comment you made just now where you said that you put these images next to each other because of the same kind of composition, the foreground composition that they both have. Now, for you, especially like as we've gone through your website, everything is just it flows extremely well. And I think as creatives, I think I can speak for other photographers or just creatives when it comes to putting together a portfolio and a body of your work, that can tend to be very intimidating because you may have a lot of images and not everything needs to be something that you pick up and showcase on your website. So,
Yeah.
how did you go about picking your images? And being able to show one the strongest bodies of your work, but then also like I love how you have things placed in a specific way. What how did you go about that, and what was really the overall goal that you had when putting together your site?
Yeah, you know, I thought about how cool it would be to make a website that feels like you're walking into a gallery or a
Mm.
museum, you know, and you know, when you walk into a gallery, there's a lot of negative space, a lot of white space, and then you just
Mm-hmm.
have art, you know, in different places. And so that was like my initial thought. And then from there, I was like, okay, well, what work do I like the most? What work do I feel the most proud of?
Yeah.
And I can always add more work. In fact, you know, by this point, you know, and you probably do as well, but you have thousands of photos. Like there are so many photos that I have that when I really put together my favorites, my homepage becomes
Mm-hmm.
300, 440, you know, so many photos that
Yeah.
no one will maybe not no one, but I don't think people have the attention span anymore to
Yeah.
really, you know, do that. If they want to do that, they'll probably buy a book or something like a
Yeah.
photography book. So I thought about how can I showcase 30, 40, 50 images max that I feel really proud of, that I feel really speak to my identity when it comes to compositions, when it comes to
Mm.
subtle coloring, when it comes to even directing work like this, when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
all the other things that I kind of find important and valuable. How can I put together the most accurate, succinct sort of portfolio that will do the job, you know? And so that's how
Mm.
some of these images were chosen. It's just that I felt like they added different things. There's group shots, there's single shots, there's
Yeah.
you know shots on the beach, there's shots in Spain like this one on the right, there are shots in you know multiple countries, there's shots
Mm-hmm.
for you know the various clients. Like everything is sort of chosen because of its variety but also cohesiveness, you know, at the same
Yes.
time. So
Oh, absolutely. Can you scroll down? I have another question.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
two questions based off of what you mentioned before. Go down a little bit more. The photo you took in
sure,
Spain, right there.
yeah.
How, so one thing that I personally love about your journey is you have had, and I think this is what makes you very unique, and it's a blessing in itself for you to have had access to locations and to
Mm,
find place spaces that are just so unique. 'Cause I think sometimes it's very difficult for creatives to feel like, oh, I don't know where to shoot. So I have a two-part question of like, one, how did you source this location? Like, was it just a
yeah.
building you saw? And then two, what advice would you give to other creatives when it comes to, looking for locations?
You know what? I will even show this on live if we can. I don't know if Instagram lets you see your saved things, but maybe not. Oh, because I'm not signed in. If I was signed in, I would show it.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I saw a quote once that said that your creative your creativity is sort of a combination of the library of things in your head. And I thought, wow, that
Mm,
makes a lot of sense, and I feel as though like I'm always looking at locations, I'm always looking at places, I'm always looking at things that inspire me. Art. I'm being filled
mhm.
with art that I like. Being filled with
Yeah.
music. Like I like jazz. You see a saxophone in the image on the left.
Yeah.
These are, things that I care about. And so I feel as though I just have an Instagram saved folder where I save a bunch of
Mm,
locations. I think maybe even on Pinterest, if Pinterest is logged in, I could probably show a little bit of that as well. I just kind of make a point to save things all the time, save
mhm.
different things that I like, save like here's one that I made for this is actually a great example. If the stream can go back to the display, but I
Mhm.
made a slight kind of a page where I'm just talking about set design and I'm looking for set design
Wow.
specifically for lookbooks. So there's much larger pages than this, but I was like, okay, how can I make it like this? How can I make it like that? I'm taking little bits of things that I
Wow.
like. And then ultimately, when I come into it, that's where this sort of set for this came
Mhm.
about. It was something that we created like an arch. We kind of created all these different things. And so I guess my advice to people who are trying to find that next level of creativity is to think about, okay, what do I like?
Yeah.
Who am I? What do I like? Where does my inspiration come from? And how can I see and access more of that? Because by inhaling it, by breathing it in, by eating it, by seeing it
Mhm.
constantly, I'll start to differentiate between what makes something great and what's something that I like but I don't love. And then when you find those things you love, and then you're able to sort of double down on them. Okay, I love this composition. Okay, let me see more
Yeah.
compositions. Let me see more and more. And then now I see compositions in films. I see compositions as people are walking down the street. I see compositions everywhere, and then your brain sort of becomes active, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No,
And
absolutely.
yeah, so I think that would be my advice is just continually fill your mind with different things, continually fill your mind with inspiration, because from there you'll start to like create your own ideas that are like permutations or combinations of these different people and different arts that you've seen.
Wow. No, that's such incredible advice because I think we don't realize how intentional we have to be about the things that we are absorbing in and the things
Yeah,
that we are like eating, especially as we are on social media. We scroll, we scroll, we scroll. We don't realize how much
right.
of that is really programmed into us and the things that we do, the decisions we make just as people as a whole. So I love how you take that approach as an artist to be intentional about what it is that you are absorbing and the research that you're doing to kind of decide what it is that you like and how it kind of translates into your work. It's really flawless in that transition there. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to ask you
No,
another
thank you.
question specific about you mentioned that if I think when we were talking about how many photos to have
Hmm.
in on your website, would you ever consider a book? Because you had mentioned like, oh, if I had like 100 pictures, maybe in a book, but on my website it needs to be like 30, 40. Like, have you ever thought of like creating, or are you maybe not at that point yet? Like, is there a point where you want to create a physical body of work that is in a book form, maybe?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's something that I've teased a few times, and there's
Hmm.
always like an appetite for it. People always when are you going to release it? When are you going to come out with it? And I will work on it. I will put it out. I just don't know when. I feel as though like it could just be the artist within me that feels like, oh, it's never done. Like I could add this, I could add that, but I probably do have enough now for a small book, and I would love to make one because I think
Hmm.
that one having your physical work, there's nothing like that, being able to sit down,
Yeah.
read it, open it up, look at it, feel it. That's like the best feeling, but then also to be able to give that to other people, and ideally even have that in like a coffee table book
Hmm.
in an IKEA or something, or I don't know,
Yeah.
just in somewhere where someone will appreciate that minimalist. I feel like that that is definitely a goal, something I'm working on, but I haven't quite got enough yet where I feel
Yeah.
like, because I don't know, maybe that's just me thinking like I just want it to be expansive and 500 pages, but I should probably make it a bit less than that.
I mean, whatever you decide to make it, people will be buying it, me included. So take your time on that. But it is, I could say from me personally, it is a something that I would love to see you do and something that I would love to have in my home as well. And so I think that's just really great to see how like different forms of print that you could potentially have your work in. Um, Another question I wanted to ask you is because as we're looking through, I haven't really been paying attention to the years of the work, or if this is around the same time, or if this is like, I think the photo we did of Cassandra was probably back in like what, COVID times or so.
Yeah, 2020, I think
2020, yeah,
January.
January 2020. And then like I know you have bodies of work that go into even recent years. So like how would you say that you have seen your work evolve in the coming years? How has it evolved up until this point, and how do you foresee it in the future continuing to evolve?
Yeah, that's a really great question because I really feel that what's evolved in my work is the level of intricacy, which is
Mm,
a blessing and a curse because I feel like initially it was really easy to just go out and take a photo and then you just have this photo. But now it seems as though there's so much more involved, like,
mm,
because you want your work to continually elevate. And so working with better makeup artists, working with a better crew,
hmm
better models, better locations, better set design. Even like the image I'm showcasing now, these on the screen, you have the image on the left, which was shot with a hand painted backdrop. I had a
mm,
set designer actually create it and paint it herself. And that's a level of intricacy that I would have never aspired for before. I was thought, oh, just yeah, stand up against the wall,
yeah.
we'll figure it out. And so, but now it's like, okay, no, I want the hair to look the right way. I want the backdrops. I want it's like the final touches are now being thought about a lot more. Like, even like curating the compositions beforehand and thinking about, okay, I love this composition. If we can get it exactly like this, and then
hmm
add this, add that. And so that's the level of evolution that I think is a blessing and a curse because in one sense it's a blessing because you see your work get better and more personal and have those details that you see other photographers that you aspire to be like have. But then I guess the curse side of it is that it now takes you longer to create
mm,
work, whereas before you were just pick up your camera, go shoot something, done. Now you don't want the work that you release to be the same. You want it to be
yeah.
better and better every time. And so that's where, you know, I think that's the evolution now is like trying to get, you know,
Mm,
more and more out of it. And so not just, like even this image on the right, you see the makeup look. These two girls were Brazilian models who were in town for a week. And I just thought, oh, how cool would it be to do something with green and yellow and colors from their
yeah.
home country and getting the makeup artist that was going to be able to
Mm,
execute that look the right way. And so it becomes more than just a portrait. Now it's a portrait that has a feeling and
wow.
more authenticity to who they are. And so all those little details, that's how the work I think is evolving.
That is incredible. I personally did not even notice where the models were from and your incorporation of their country's flags in their eye makeup and the intentionality behind that. That is honestly incredible as far as that regard goes. Because that was not something I was just like, oh, I love how, for me, I was like, oh yeah, I love this image. I just love how in sync everything is. The makeup, the colors, the complementary, great. But like to be like to take it to an extra level to be like, oh no, that was intentional because of this reason is
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you. Nobody will
Ah,
notice. I feel like there's so many things you do like that in your work that you
yeah, that
you feel a sense of pride and over, but
Yeah,
nobody will know, and you just kind of
yeah.
keep it like that.
No, I love. And we are getting towards the end like of our stream, but I have one final question that I hope would be
Sure.
impactful for our viewers. But like, what do you have any final words of wisdom for our viewers just getting started on for their journey on becoming creatives, artists, photographers, designers, whatever it might be, kind of starting that journey? What would you kind of give them as words of wisdom?
Yeah, I could probably be here all day talking to them because I feel like I was just there not very long ago.
hmm
And I think that it's you just take it in stages. Like first of all, realize it's a marathon and not a sprint. And then each stage of the marathon, what is it that I can do to improve to get to the next stage, which ultimately helps me get to the end goal. And, step one looks like thinking about who you are, because really, if you want to be a photographer who creates work for that you feel proud of, that you like, then you have to kind of make it about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just make it about other people, then you'll just shoot what everybody else wants and your work will
Yeah.
be all over the place. But thinking about who am I? What do I want my work to say? What's my
Mm,
passion? What's my vision? And how can I develop that? Okay, who do
yeah.
I need? That's the next thing, is like, who do I need to get that? What models do I need to work with? What people
Yeah.
do I need to work with? What crew, what team of people, what locations, and start to piece these things together. And then
Yeah.
I think there's knowledge and repetition, like going out. I remember one of the very first shoots I did in Phoenix. We shot some stuff, and I got back and I looked at it, and it was really grainy in a way that I didn't expect, and it was because my ISO was so high. And I learned that, okay, my ISO needs to come down next time and
Yeah.
I'm shooting, and or maybe I needed a better camera probably too, but my ISO needs to come down. So every time you shoot, you learn
You learn
something
something
new,
new.
like for me, I curated my style, through learning the lighting that I liked. I learned that I like natural light, which is overcast or which is cloudy or which is soft, and that happened through time. And so the more times you shoot and try ideas, the more you learn as well. So I guess it comes down to learning, trying, continually shooting, continually learning about who you are, and then reaching out to people.
Mm,
I was really blessed to like have photography mentors like Mark Clennon, who's a photographer I love, who really just took me under their wing. It was like, yeah, I'll help you. And that was through me reaching out. And so
I love
nobody
that.
for me right now is too big to reach out to. They may not reply,
But
but
they're never too
it's not gonna,
big.
it's not gonna stop me from trying.
Oh, that's good. Awesome. No, Oghalé, thank you so much for that. That was incredible, incredible advice. I hope that you guys enjoyed this stream. Thank you so much for joining us here at Adobe Live for another episode of Adobe Spotlight. Make sure you stay tuned because coming up next, we have the File News Show with Ryan Selvey, your best source of artist, creator, and tech news. And until next time, enjoy the rest of the streams. We will see y'all another time. Bye.